Okay. Now just getting started. So some housekeeping for everyone. Please make sure that your audio is on mute. We have a lot of people joining us today, so I just want to make sure that there isn't any background noise. So for now, please keep yourself on mute. Also, we'd love to see who's joined us. If you could please change your names to be a little bit more reflective. So as an example, we'd love to have your name and where you're from, just so we have an idea of where people are and where they're coming from. And we'd also love if you could turn your video on just so we could see your lovely faces. We'll have time at various points to review questions just to keep things a little bit more streamlined. I ask that you add your questions in the chat. My colleague Malvika Kumar, who you can see at IESE-Malvika Kumar, waving there if you're on the right screen. She'll be monitoring the chat throughout, and we'll make sure that we go over as many questions as we can, because we're going through a lot of content that we want to get through within the hour. And I would also like to mention, try to keep your questions a little bit more broad. I know that you're going to have case-specific questions that deal with, your specific background and things that are going to be very, very specifically related to you. Since there is a good number of people, we want to keep the questions to be a little bit more general interest. And if there's very, very case-specific questions, I'd recommend reaching out to your specific associate director. You can find out who that is on our website. We do things regionally. And just to introduce, and just to go over what our agenda is for today, we'll get to meet the admissions team a bit, do an overview of the program for that may be new to it, a little breakdown of the admissions process, some of what we're looking for within our test scores, a little bit of insights on our essays and some of the recommendations, because I know these are all areas that we get a lot of questions about. And as I mentioned, at any time throughout, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat function and we will go through as many as possible. Okay, just to introduce myself, my name is Deborah McCandless. I am the Associate Director of Admissions, responsible for all of our MBA and Masters in Management applicants based in the US and Canada. I am also a graduate from the MBA program myself. And Malvika, I can call you up to introduce yourself as well, just so that they know who you are.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Hi, my name is Malvika. I am the admissions director responsible for India and Africa, same as Deborah, MBA and Masters of Management. I'm also an alumni from the school and I graduated in 2015. I live in London.
Excellent. And lurking in the background is Kelly, who's making sure that all of the technical side of things is working correctly, and I will let her stay in the background. But just to give you a little bit of an overview, I thought I'd share some pictures from my experience at IESE. So I graduated about 10 years ago, so you can see a little bit of various things that happened throughout the program. We tend to not have pictures of me in class because we don't bring your cameras there, so it tends to be a little bit more of the fun stuff. So just starting sort of top left, that was from a trip that a couple of my Brazilian classmates put together for us winter break of the second year. The top is actually from the Tomatina, which is a festival in Buñol, Spain, where people throw tomatoes, which we put together before. And I think the other highlight I really like is the one that's the top right. So those were actually all of the women in my class that had motos, so scooters. I am the one that's second to the right in the white helmet, which you actually see in the picture below, which was me studying with some of my teammates, which pictures I took just so my friends knew that this is actually what I did most of the time. They tend to see all the fun stuff. Just to go on, every discussion of IESE starts with the mission of the program. This is fundamental to the DNA of how the program works. So this is basically underlies how we teach our classes as well. So we're very heavy on case study method, but every case that we do, there's always going to be part of the discussion that deals with what is the impact on the people involved. And the way that IESE teaches is really about supporting this, and it's something that you see throughout the school and the character of the institution as well. And so just to give you a little bit of an overview of what the class looks like, typical class will have probably about 55 to 75 nationalities represented, 350 people, roughly, which we break up into 5 sections of 70. About 85% of our class is international students. We have a bunch of averages here. They're averages, they aren't benchmarks. So for us, it's always a matter of like who's going to be best for fit for the institution. So, you know, I always tell people to be wary of the numbers. They're not all set in stone as well. And our admissions process is very much about getting to know the individual and who's going to fit well with us and the community as a whole. As I mentioned, there isn't really any sort of standard profile for a IESE student. Here's a few examples. So Mariel came from an engineering background. She's now works for McKinsey in the US. She's American. Sean Porto was actually the class president of the class of 2016. He's Canadian, came from a banking background. He's now working for Adidas in Germany. You can also see Hao Jian, who's, I believe, Chinese, who also had her own journeys and is now in France, and James Hooley, who had a military background. And we do have a few veterans every year as well, and it is definitely one of those areas that I think are strongly encouraged, though we actually just started a veterans club in the last couple of years. So they're definitely a very specific profile, but the point is there isn't one particular version of IESE student that we're looking for. For us, it's all about the community as a whole. So for us, you know, we have relatively small class sizes. Within our classes, you're given a team, and the team is your support system throughout that first year. And we try to make them as diverse as possible to give you perspectives from people from all over the world, as well as from all different industries. So you have a support system as you're heading into the first year, which I've had referred to as drinking from a fire hose in terms of the amount of information that you're getting taught in that first year. You're also given a team mentor and a team facilitator. So you have both a student as well as a professor that sort of that's there to mentor you as well. So that you do not get lost in the shuffle, because I think IESE very much looks at people as individuals rather than numbers. Just to give you an example, this is my team. So for us, we had 8 people from 6 countries on 5 continents. We had consulting, communications, accounting, retail, operations, entrepreneurship backgrounds from all over the world. And, you know, this was the group of people that I got to see every single morning as I was preparing for my cases. They're the ones that I did all of my team projects with for the first year. I think a big part of the learning process in terms of those interpersonal skills is how do you manage working with a team that's this diverse? Because everyone's going to be heading into situations with information that's going to be new to them, with a group of people that have very different communication styles as well. So I really love this group of people. They're fantastic. I get to see them every once in a while. We are scattered all over the globe these days. I think one's in Vancouver, one's in South Carolina, got a couple in London, Belgium, and other parts of the world as well. Just to give you an example of sort of what a team looks like, these days you'll have an even more diverse groups of teams, because at the time when I was in the program, we still had a section that was taught in Spanish. So now it's a lot more integrated within the program as a whole. So just to give you an idea of what the MBA program looks like. So there are two tracks. Our traditional MBA is 19 months broken up between 2 years. And we do have a consolidated version, which is 15 months. And the difference being the summer, whether you use that for the internship or whether you do the summer entrepreneurial experience, which is the other alternative for the summer for those that are interested in finding ideas to launch their own entrepreneurial enterprises. For us, first year for everyone is core curriculum. So you take classes, you take 24 core courses with the goal of giving you an understanding of the full business ecosystem. And then the second year, you can focus on the things that you find most relevant. Second year, we also offer 4 different specialties. So the goal of this is really to signal to the market that you have particular focus. So we have those in international business, entrepreneurship and innovation, finance, and I'm missing one that I can't remember. I'm sure Malvika can update me later, sorry. And second year is also where you have more chance for international exposure. So this can be done through study abroad. You can do a full term at another school. We have about 30 partner institutions around the globe. And we also offer 4 international intensive modules in the second year. So in August, September, you can do 2 weeks in the New York campus, which is actually where I'm based, or in Brazil with 1 week in our Sao Paulo campus, 1 week in Rio doing a consulting project with a local company. And then in January of the second year, we offer 2 weeks of studies in Shanghai, China, or 2 weeks in Nairobi, which is also structured as 1 week doing consulting project and 1 week taking classes. And then everyone graduates together in May. Now, moving on, just to give you a little bit of an idea of where people land after the MBA. This is sort of a geographic distribution. We also have people that end up in all different kinds of jobs as well. So, in the last few years, about a little under a third of our class has gone into consulting, around a quarter has gone into tech, about 20% into finance, and then there's a very long tail in terms of where people land. I actually did some statistics on the US and Canadian population and where they are for the last, where the last 5 years of graduates have been, and there's over 130 companies that are represented with that too. So this just gives you a little bit of a distribution of where people end up around the globe. So obviously leans a little bit more heavily on Europe because we are a European-based school. And you'll actually find that number in North America will go up after a few years because it's majority the US that's covered in that, and typically companies will hire US passport holders or green card holders directly out of international schools, but they won't hire people that need visas directly out of international schools. However, you find an inflow that comes in about 2 years later when people can transfer internally within companies. So that number actually increases with time. But now, so just wanted to check in to see if there's any questions at this point. Malvika, is there anything that I should go over?
There are a lot of questions, but they're quite specific questions. So I've been trying to answer them. But there was some questions about GMAT versus GRE and how the school looks at those 2 options.
Excellent. I will be getting into that later, so we can hold off on the application parts of things. Anything else that's related to this section?
No, not
okay.
So far.
Excellent. So now I'll move on to why you guys are all here, which is the application section of things. So this is our admissions process. So this is sort of a general overview I think our requirements aren't too dissimilar from most business schools. So we have an online application. There's an application fee, which is the last thing that you do before submitting, just so you know. We require your official transcripts. That's from your undergrad and any master's programs that you may have taken part in. If there's other studies that you've done, we'd also love to see those as well. We have required GMAT, GRE, and English tests. I'll get into more detail with all of these elements later. And we require one letter of recommendation and a photo. And basically, once our admissions deadline passes, we review all of the application from the round, and then those that move forward get invited for an interview. I will mention all of our interviews are with IESE staff. This is a little bit different than a lot of business schools. As I mentioned, for us, like, the community at IESE is very important. You'll notice I'm an alum, Malvika is an alum, all of the other associate directors of admissions, we're all alumni from the program. And we've all been through it ourselves and know kind of what works and what doesn't work within a IESE environment. So while we love our alumni, our other alumni from the program, and we're friends with a lot of them personally, we make sure that we manage all of our interviews, because for us, it's really important that we get to know each of you individually rather than farming it out to alumni. So you'll notice that's a little bit of a difference between us. I think we're very hands-on in our admissions approach. So we want to make sure we know everyone that comes into the class and knows how they'll fit within the community. And then you'll notice we do have something that's a little different called an assessment day. You may or may not get invited to this. It is one of the things that's a little bit different about our application process. For those that do get invited, it's not a requirement, but it's strongly encouraged that you do join if you can. And basically, we have you join for an MBA exercise that lasts a few hours. So for now, we would likely be doing them virtually, but when it is time to, when we are able to start doing them in person again, we will likely start doing those in person again. Historically, we've done them in our New York campus, in our Sao Paulo campus, in Barcelona, and in Singapore, just so that people don't have to travel. And given the international nature of our student body, we want to make sure that we come to people as well. And then after that, we review everyone's applications again, and final decisions are made. Our scholarship committee is separate from our admissions committee, so you may not also find out that at the same time. It may be a separate decision. Okay, just getting into some of the nitty-gritty here. Admissions deadlines. So we have one coming up on October 6th. I guess it wouldn't surprise me if we have a lot of people that are looking at that one. I actually meant to run a poll that I forgot about to see where people are within the application process. Kelly, if you wouldn't mind just popping that up so people can add it, just so I can get an idea of where people are, that would be great. But just to give you an idea of sort of what our deadlines are, and also to let you know when you should be finding out by. I think one of the pieces of advice that I rarely hear, but I think is very important, is don't just look at the deadlines that you need to meet. We understand that you may be applying to more than one school, but make sure that you also understand what your decision-making window is for all of these schools, because what I end up hearing every single year, and all of my colleagues as well, is people who really, really want to come to IESE that applied to multiple schools, and they're under the gun from another institution that's on a different timeline than us, and they have to pay a deposit or lose their spot. And our decision's still like a month away. So just be very mindful of how you decide to time your applications, just to make sure that you're going to be able to make the choice that you want to be making, rather than the one that you feel like you have to. So if everyone wouldn't mind filling out the questionnaire that just popped up, just so we can get an idea of where people are in the process as well, that would be great. Okay. And so now into some of the more detailed elements of things, the essay questions. So what you will find is most of the application process is pretty dry, very fact-based. The essay questions are where we finally get to know you as an individual and your personality. And this is where you get to talk a little bit more about your interests and your background within your own words. So, you know, first question, if you had to come up with a motto for your life, what would it be and why? And also, ideally, part of the goal with some of these essay questions is to give you guys a chance to think and reflect yourself. I know I've been through the essay questions myself when I was applying to business schools. They were a pain to deal with. I did not enjoy them, but I think a lot of the stuff that you have to go through while pulling together the answers, I think are very important as well in terms of understanding your priorities and why you're at the institution as well. So when it comes to the first one, this is really your first chance for us to get to know you as an individual. I would also mention, like, just be careful with something like this. Make sure that you include examples that back it up. Like this is our chance to get to know you, but we also want to make sure that you do tell us, like, show it, don't say it, I think is how I would generally put it. So do try to include an example that shows this, and not just, you know, you talking about it in a cerebral fashion. And then what are your short-term and long-term career goals, and how will the IESE MBA help you achieve them? So this is really sort of the meat and gravy of the MBA application. Like, you know, we are obviously a professional school. We want to know sort of what your journey is and how we fit in it. So I think one of the things that you really have to be careful with essay questions, and we do see this every year, mind how you copy and paste. I think this is something that people run into problems with, because I know these are not easy essays to write, so you like to reuse what you have. But there are some problems that come up with that. One, essay questions are different across schools. So do make sure that you're actually answering the question that we are asking. And also, every once in a while with copy and paste, you miss things. Like, let's say, the wrong school name. I can say that everyone is shocked to hear this, but every single year we see essays with the wrong school name, and I can guarantee that's not really going to make the best first impression. So really be careful with some of those details, and I think that's just a general MBA admissions recommendation. And then the last part is the optional essay. And this is really the chance to say anything that you really wanted to say that there isn't another spot for in the application. So we see people that use this for a few things. You know, if there's something that you're really proud of, you know, some accomplishments, something that you're passionate about that really defines you, you know, and there's no other place for it within, then this is a great option for it. If there's some perceived weakness that you want to explain, let's say, you know, you have a gap in your resume and it's because you were sick or something else was going on, or if you had a semester in university where like everything just went off the rails, but you were dealing with some personal issues, or you'd taken on too much outside of school or something like that, don't let us fill in the gaps. Like, help us along and tell us why you thought that there were problems. And I think that's what the optional essay is good for. If you're just reiterating what you're saying elsewhere in the application, don't write it. You don't need it. It's called an optional essay quite purposefully because it is an optional essay. So only really include it if it's something that is going to be, you know, valuable for helping us to understand you a little bit better, that isn't touched on elsewhere. And scholarships. So this is actually the last of the essays that you can write. So how do you plan to finance your MBA, and why do you think you deserve a scholarship? We have a very open-ended prompt for this. And we have a super open-ended prompt for this because everyone has something very, very different to say. I will mention the majority of our scholarships are merit-based. So we do look at your essay question. We will also look at it within the context of your larger application and your application process as well. So it isn't just based on your essay. And I will mention our scholarships are not based on nationality or anything like that, and anyone can apply. And you do not have to apply for a specific one. We do have a whole list of scholarships, you can check them out, but you don't have to write for a specific one, because how our scholarship committee works is we'll review your application and your scholarship essay. And for those that are given a scholarship, we'll make sure that you're allotted to the correct one. So you don't have to write like just for the Women Leadership Scholarship or just for the social impact, like write in general, and we will make sure that you're allotted the appropriate one. And letter of recommendations. So this is the part of the application that we tend to get the most calls about as the application deadline's coming in, because this is the part of the application you have the least direct control over. So this is one that we recommend putting a little bit of forethought into. Do not leave these discussions until the last minute. So this is just to give you an idea of what your recommenders will be asked. These are relatively standard questions, so they shouldn't be dissimilar from anything that's part of most MBA applications. So we're not part of the GMAC like universal recommendation, but frankly, I think the questions are the same or almost the same. But how it works for your recommenders, just so you're aware, is on your application, we'll ask you for the names and emails of your recommender. They will get an automatic email that will give them access to our recommendation platform. Just so you know, these should be written by your recommenders. They should not be written by you. We do notice when things don't sound right. It is actually kind of clear. That said, like we do get a lot of questions about like who you should have as a recommender. It's gonna vary from school to school, but for us, we want it to be someone that knows you within a professional context. In an ideal world, it's your current boss. That said, we understand that is not always a conversation that everyone's gonna be in a position to have. So if it's not your current boss, maybe a previous boss or, you know, a boss at a previous company, but ideally not someone too far back in the past. Try to keep it to someone within the last 2 years that you've worked with. And I do always recommend, like, make sure you like grab coffee with them, remind them a little bit of your background, and tell them a little bit about your goals with the MBA, just so that they're aware of the context that you're coming into MBA with as well, and give them time. You know, it's obviously your MBA application is a priority for you. It is not going to be a priority for your recommenders. And you know, this is where people run into problems a lot, because they're like, I sent this to my recommender like a month ago, and then they went on vacation or got busy and they forgot, and if you're having issues, or if you're not sure whether someone that you're thinking of is an appropriate recommender, you can also always reach out to us too. But we only require one. I do get a lot of questions about whether someone should have 2 recommendations. I'd say only really if they're going to add something new. I'd say the other reason why you might want to have 2 recommendations is if your preferred recommender is a bit flaky and you're worried about them getting their recommendation in. It's okay to have like the second one as a backup, just in case they don't come through. So that's why we do have a bit of the flexibility in terms of the number that you can add, because every once in a while recommenders just kind of go MIA. It does unfortunately happen. I'd also say one of the other things that you should consider with your recommenders is obviously find someone that's going to say something good about you. It does actually happen sometimes that people make poor choices with recommenders related to that aspect. It isn't as frequent, but it does happen. So make sure that you actually choose someone that likes you and thinks that you do good work.
Deborah, I'm going to stop you right here because I'm getting a lot of questions on recommendations.
Okay.
So is it okay if I ask you some here?
Absolutely.
Great. So one, can a team member be a recommender?
it would not be our preference. We want someone that you've reported to rather than a colleague, because it's going to hold a lot more weight. If you don't have that kind of relationship with your boss, as I mentioned, like a previous boss, someone that's left the company, it doesn't even have to be someone that you've necessarily like directly reported to, but sort of someone higher up. Like a recommendation from a colleague is not going to have as much weight. I do know this also sometimes becomes an issue if you like work for a family business too.
That was the second question.
Yes. So family business, we do not want your relative to be the one that does your recommendation. So if you're in a situation where you report to a family member, they would not be an appropriate recommender. In those cases, there can be some alternatives. So if you have clients that you've reported to, or other people in sort of the ecosystem that aren't related to you, I would just recommend like check in with us on specifics cases to see who would be appropriate and who wouldn't. Because some of that's really gonna have to deal with your particular situation, and not everyone has the same set of situations that they're dealing with. Any other ones, Malvika?
There's some essay questions. I don't know if you want to dive into those as well.
I can go back to the essay questions for sure.
Okay. So there's a question from Florian who's asking, regarding post-MBA career goals, in my case, I have more than one plan, and I'd like to use the MBA to reflect these plans. So would you rather that I describe the two plans, or should I just pick one and describe it in more detail?
Yeah, so I would say if you have sort of two directions that you're interested in, I would include the two. And frankly, we understand with business school that not everyone has everything sorted out. You know, it's, you know, a lot of people use the MBA to explore, but the goal for this is really to understand a little bit of where your head's at and like how far along in the process you are in terms of considering things. It doesn't mean that we will reject someone that's still, you know, a little bit more open, but having direction is definitely very helpful within an MBA process because it makes sure that you can use your time as well as possible, because there's so many things that happen during the MBA that if you come in with sort of no idea, then you can get a bit overwhelmed, especially for a school like IESE, where we are quite academically tough, and you do have a lot to, and there's so many career like opportunities, career activities going on that you just can't be in more than one place at a time. So, you know, maybe, you know, if we didn't allow people to graduate that didn't do what they said on their application, we'd have a very low graduation rate. You know, MBA really does, even those people that have like know exactly what they want will come in and get exposed to a lot of new things as well and may change their mind, and that's also perfectly fine. But for us, it's a little bit of sort of understanding your story and where we as an institution fit in with it. And also like the essay questions are also a little bit of how we get to know that like we actually are the school that's right for you. So, you know, this is one of these places where you reflect that you actually understand IESE and what it can give to you as well, rather than you just looked at rankings and just went for whatever. So for us, like, you know, a little bit of is sort of understanding, you know, how much you know about the institution and where we fit within your journey. And I think for us, so again, doesn't have to be one thing. If you're like, I'm deciding between entrepreneurship and fintech or something like that, is perfectly reasonable to include that. If you happen to know to the detail level, like what organizations you might be interested in or where you want to be, those are also things that we're quite curious about as well. Obviously, we do have a word limit. We do require you to be pithy about how you approach these situations. But yeah, if it's completely reasonable to include two options. Malvika, anything else?
Nope, just a lot of questions about recommenders. I had no idea.
Okay.
So I think we're okay for the application questions.
Okie dokie. And GMAT and GRE. everyone's least favorite part of the MBA process, myself included. Malvika and I have both been through this. It's not enjoyable. And we do get a lot of questions about like GMAT waivers if you have, you know, extra experience or a terminal degree or something like that. We do not offer GMAT waivers. You can take the GMAT or the GRE, but we require at least one of them, and it has to be an active score. And, you know, when people ask me about this, there's a few reasons I mention this. As I mentioned, academics are very intense at IESE. GMAT, GRE, they're not perfect tools, but they're the best tools that we have. So in terms of making sure that people are going to be able to manage the rigor of a program like IESE. And we use this in conjunction also with your previous academic scores. So also for people that maybe, you know, didn't shine in undergrad, this is also a chance to do a little bit better as well, to balance out if things didn't go well for you when you were, you know, 19, when you may not have made your best life choices. You know, also I get a lot of questions about you know, what happens if you take it multiple times, how are those things viewed? We are going to always go with whatever the highest combined score is. So we're not going to take your highest verbal and highest quant. We're going to take the highest combined score and we're going to use that. I do think that people can sometimes be a little bit quick in canceling scores. Personally, I would not recommend canceling scores, even if they don't meet like the standard that you want to see. And there's a couple reasons for this. One, schools are going to really only really going to look at your top score anyways. And we've definitely had times where people have like not loved their score, canceled it, and then retaken it, and it ended up being their highest score, and they had to reinstate it in the end. So, you know, I feel like that whole game of canceling and bringing back is just kind of a great way to spend more money at GMAC and other test providers. So like, just keep the score, and you may not love it, but we'll look at the highest one in the end. So go with that. Our average GMAT is 680. You know, average GRE is a little bit more vague because we just get a lower number of them, so we don't have as good of an average, but roughly the equivalent to the GMAT in the GRE. And I do get questions. We do not accept expired scores. So GMAT, GRE scores, they last 5 years. You have to apply while they're still active. So, you know, that like 750 you got 10 years ago is not going to be something that we can look at. We have to go with your current score. And that means, because it doesn't actually have to be live, it doesn't have to still be valid like by the time that school starts, but it has to be valid when you apply, just so that we can get the official report from the provider. And if you're worried that it's about to expire, something like that, communicate with us, and if it's something on the margin, talk to us, and we'll see how to proceed. Now, English language test. So obviously there's a good chunk of the class that do not speak English as a first language. We support a number of different English language tests. Just to give you a little bit of sort of an idea of where we are with the scores, we don't actually have hard cutoffs, but do keep in mind that we teach case study, which requires you to talk in class in English. So you do need to be solidly proficient in English so that you can really be successful in the program. And admittedly, like, not the TOEFL and those other scores aren't always necessarily 100% accurate on some of those parts, but this is just kind of a little bit of a benchmark. And if you're borderline, obviously, like, we'll also be seeing how you manage English within interviews as well. So we just want to make sure that anyone that's in the program is going to be able to manage it in English. And we do have exemptions to the English language tests. So native speakers, so that includes Hong Kong and India, and also anyone that has studied undergrad or worked for 2 years in an English speaking environment. Also, we will allow, you can get waived if you're borderline or unsure. Again, reach out to your associate director to get details. I deal with US and Canada, so it doesn't come up as much within my particular region, but I definitely know it's something that's a factor in other parts of the world at a much higher level. And one of the other things, just to add to the GMAT and GRE side of things, is for those that are specifically interested in consulting, GMAT can be part of the recruitment process. It's not for every firm in every location, and where that bar is going to vary, but for top consulting firms, they will frequently use GMAT as a filtering system. So if you have like a 600 GMAT and want to work for McKinsey in London, it's not going to happen. You're just going to get filtered out of the process without ever having a chance to talk with them. So, you know, where that bar is in terms of score is going to vary depending on the organization and the location. And some locations, it's not really a factor that they look at, but for a lot of the places where IESE alumni want to end up, it does become a factor, and I'd like to mention it early on. So if that is a dream of yours to go into, you have the time to work on that as well. All right, so
Questions. Lots of questions. Yes. So number one, is it possible to submit the application form and then hand in your GMAT results a little later? So for example, for people who are keen to get into round one, but they may be taking their GMAT on, I don't know, the first week of November. What is the gap, and is it possible?
Yeah, I would say talk with your associate director on timing for things. So we will have test scores that follow in certain cases, but there's limitations to that, and we can't start reviewing applications that are incomplete as well. So talk with your associate director on timings for applications. If it's late, we're probably going to ask you to just wait until the following deadline if it's just too far off of our process.
Great. In terms of English tests, a lot of the TOEFL and IELTS have been canceled due to COVID since June. Can I apply first without the score and submit it later?
Yeah, again, talk with your associate director on how to do this. You can submit the score later, but everything's going to be reviewed like this on a case-by-case basis. We understand this is not a normal year, and there's a lot of other extenuating circumstances going on. So I just recommend communicating. I think it always helps. And I think IESE as a school, we do make our admissions staff relatively available for questions like this as well.
Great. And there was a couple of scholarship questions related to GMAT. So if, let's say, what is a competitive GMAT score to be considered for a scholarship? And are people less than 700 GMAT score considered for a scholarship?
So everything is reviewed holistically with our process. So, you know, GMAT alone is not a criteria. It doesn't define you as an individual. We view it within the context of your larger application. Admittedly, having a higher GMAT will definitely improve your chances greatly on scholarship front, but it isn't the be all and end all in terms of our decision-making process for these things. And we do understand that also, you know, people have other circumstances that impact their GMAT as well. So, you know, we have certain expectations for, you know, if you have a lot of infrastructure in your country to be able to do the GMAT, you know, we're going to have higher expectations than countries that doesn't have a GMAT center at all as well. So again, everything is viewed within context, and that's also why we have associate directors that focus on particular regions, because we understand the context in which our students come out of. So I cover North America. We have someone based in Sao Paulo that covers LATAM. Malvika covers India and Africa. We have people that cover, we have 4 people who are based in East Asia that cover different parts of Asia as well. And we understand the school systems that people are coming from. We understand the academic environments, the professional environments that people are coming from as well. So we don't need to necessarily have those elements explained to us, but it also means that we view people within the culture and the background that they come from, and everyone sort of has, you know, we view you as individuals, and the test score is not the only thing that matters to us. And I've definitely seen us reject people with 780s who just weren't going to be a good fit for the institution as well. So just getting a good GMAT score is not enough to make sure that you're going to get into IESE. You also need to be prepared for the other parts of the application process as well.
Okay, thank you. So one of the other questions is how best to use the optional essay?
I mean, it's all going to depend on the individual for this. As I mentioned, do not use the optional essay if you're saying the same exact thing as you're saying elsewhere. How to use the essay is really going to depend on your individual case. So again, as I mentioned, like if there's a specific weakness within your application, like, you know, there's like a year where nothing's happening and it's because you were on contract with a company and they pushed you off, or something along those lines. You know, just make sure that we know those things. If you're like, you know, you are a competitive, I don't know, rower or something, and that's not put in some other part of your application, and it's something that very much defines you, like, yeah, we'd love to hear about that as well. It really is going to depend on the individual, like what's going to be the best use of that optional essay. But as with all of the essays, our goal is really just to get to know a little bit of the numbers.
Thank you, Deborah. So we also have some questions about the interviews. So if you do make it to the next round, what should I expect from the interview process? Is it a case-based? Is it competency? And how can I best prepare?
Yeah, so for us, we do not do case-based interviews for joining IESE. There will be plenty of time to do case-based stuff. Though I think the exact questions that you're going to ask are going to depend a bit on your background, as well as, you know, all of the interviewers have a slightly different style. But generally speaking, I think the things that you need to be prepared to talk about are obviously like, why IESE? Why are we the school that you're interested in? How do we fit on your journey? Also, like, know your elevator pitch. You know, if we ask you to talk about yourself, be able to do it in a somewhat concise manner as well. Like, be prepared just like you would for a job interview. So, you know, we don't want to have like 30 minutes of the interview be just like you talking about your background. That's not helpful for us, especially if it's already part of your application. And we do review your application before doing interviews as well. And, you know, I think sort of the usual things like, you know a few of your stories that you think that demonstrate, you know, strengths and weaknesses, areas where you've learned and grown and developed, times where you've taken on leadership roles, whether they've been within your professional life or elsewhere. You know, as I mentioned, I think we really do care about getting to know you a bit as an individual. And, you know, I think it is good to talk not always just about the professional life, but those things that have molded you as an individual as well, I think are really, really, really relevant to us.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. So one of the scholarship questions, this is Austin's question. The scholarship question asks, why do you think that you deserve a scholarship? I'm interested in the merit scholarship, no pressing financial need, but I'm not sure how to answer this question. Shouldn't the rest of my application explain my achievements? I would like to have more information on how to approach this question and how this question fits in with the other essay questions and the overall application.
Yeah, again, it's always going to kind of depend on the individual case, how it's managed, but really the scholarship essay is a bit of how to highlight sort of the things about you that are great, whether they be professional or in other aspects of your life too, that are really going to be distinctive to you. And again, as I mentioned, we do keep it very open-ended because what people highlight in this essay is really going to vary from individual to individual. Like, not everyone has the same background or the same yardstick that they're going to be using in terms of showing, you know, how they've really done impressive things in their life. So maybe it's your professional life. Maybe you've started a company or a new initiative or something. Maybe you've taken on leadership roles outside of school. Maybe, you know, you've had a big impact on other parts of the world as well. And frankly, it's also, you know, good to consider the mission as well when you're getting things across too, because we do care about things like that. So, you know, having a positive, lasting impact is something that matters to us as an institution. And if there's something along those lines that you can include, that's great. The scholarship essay is really about sort of crystallizing what you think is special about you and why you think you would be great for the essay community, and that's where it comes in. So you do still need to talk about the financial part of things, but we do want to hear about what makes you special, and specifically highlighted, and like why you're sort of head and shoulders above the rest.
Thanks, Deb. And assessment day, which has been a great conversation for within the admissions team as well. Given the pandemic situation, will there be an assessment day this year?
Mm-hmm. So we will be having assessment days. And I know that everyone gets nervous if they're invited or they're not invited. It sort of depends on space constraints. So it's neither good nor bad if you get invited or don't get invited. Don't freak out. Everyone gets nervous about anything that's different about your application process. We will be doing it virtually for round one. We're actually in the middle of getting things set up. Our goal was really just to figure out something that would allow us to get to know you a little bit better. And honestly, the assessment day is really about seeing you in action. And as a team, we've been working on finding ways to have this done in a virtual format that is better at seeing how you work, how you think, than it is about seeing how well you understand Zoom. So we do understand that there are, you know, people are gonna have technical difficulties, and we're gonna have patience with that. So, you know, don't get nervous about that. You know, this is how things work these days. And our team is has been virtual for a long time anyway, so we're kind of used to those elements. But you know, for those that do get invited, you're encouraged to join if you can. We understand that there are things that come up that make that impossible. But if that's the case, just let us know. And we're trying to make sure that we schedule things in a way that works with the international nature of our student body as well. So, you know, that's probably going to mean that for people in the Americas, it's going to be a bit earlier in the day. For people in East Asia, it's going to be a bit later in the day. But yeah, so in terms of what happens in assessment day, it's going to vary from assessment to assessment. We've done all kinds of different things in assessment days over the years. But the goal is to sort of come in a little bit cold. If there's some preparation that we have you guys do ahead of time, we'll give it to you a few days ahead of time, not months ahead of time. The goal is really isn't necessarily like what the outcome of the exercise is, because we understand, like, you're pre-MBA, you know, you haven't had necessarily all of the training or perspective on these things, and that's fine. We don't expect you to know high levels of finance or be experts in every field at this point, but we just really want to see how you think and work. And as I mentioned, like for us, it is very important to get to know everyone as an individual, and our assessment day is one of the ways that we do that. So for now, it's going to be virtual. We're hoping to start doing them again in person in later rounds, but everything is going to be dependent on how things continue to evolve around the world. Because of the international nature of the school, we don't want to be having an event that requires people to travel great distances if it's inappropriate to do so. So so for now, tentatively, you know, assessment days are going to be in person in 2021, but we will see how the situation evolves and we'll make decisions as things move forward as well. And I know I've been very vague on what we do with our assessment days because it does vary what we do, and everyone comes in cold, and that's fine. Everyone feels unprepared, that's also fine. But the goal is really to see you in action. And I think some people shine in that environment that maybe aren't as comfortable with interviews, and we get to see them really do well in that situation. And so for us, we just don't want to miss things when we're looking at people. So that's what the assessment is for.
Thank you, Deborah. So I think we have time for one more question. What are the advantages of applying in round 1 or round 2? And how much of the percentage of a class do we accept in those rounds? By the way, disclaimer, I've said already that there's no hard and fast rule, but the scholarships do get mentioned. But I think it'll be good for you to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to the rounds, basically there's as many spots and as much scholarship money as is left over from previous rounds. So, you know, we have rounds that go beyond round 2. We have up to round 4. I do generally recommend, especially, you know, if scholarship's important to you, try to apply in an earlier round. And just generally speaking, I always recommend apply in the earliest round that you feel good about your application. Like don't delay on these things because, you know, things can fill up. There's not quotas that we have for each round. It's really just going to have to do with how many, you know, quality applicants we have in any particular round as to what percentage that's going to be. And it varies from year to year. And honestly, with everything that's going on, I don't know what to expect this year. Generally speaking, what you'll find with business schools is we're counter-cyclical to the economy. So when things are doing badly, people decide that school's a great option. And I don't know how that's going to interact with a pandemic going on at the same time. I know for me, I went through IESE during the financial crisis, and yeah, it was a popular time to go to business school for sure. Things got very, very competitive in terms of getting in, even beyond what it would in a normal year. So like generally speaking, like apply in the earliest round that you feel comfortable. For those of you that don't have EU passports, where visas are going to come into play, I also would generally recommend also trying to apply, you know, round 2 or earlier, just to make sure that you have ample time on the visas. You know, there are definitely people that come in from all over the world with all different passports in round 3, round 4 as well, but their lives become a little bit more stressful because the window to get the visas becomes smaller. And I know especially for Americans that I deal with a lot who aren't used to having to go through rigorous visa processes, you know, it can be a little bit painful getting all the materials together and getting them dropped off and dealing with delays within the visa, because this is something that cannot be expedited. It takes the time that it takes. So you do need to give yourself ample time to, you know, get the materials together, get an appointment, and sometimes visa appointments actually do fill up. So even for those that are applying in later rounds, I generally recommend like look at the visa process as well, just so that you're not caught off balance for that.
Great.
Excellent. So I think we are hitting the hour mark. Thank you all for joining us. I hope this has been insightful for you guys. We will have a recording that will hopefully get out to you guys within the next few days. Give us a few days to get this turned around. But if you have specific questions, we do have tons of events going on. I will just mention So this is just like a few of the events that we have coming on in the next month, just to get to know the school a little bit better. So we have a bunch of regional events. We have a bunch of sort of general events, but see if there's other things that you find of interest. There's definitely opportunities to talk with both alumni and students as well, which I encourage you to do. I encourage you to get to know the school better, to interact with the admissions committee if you can before you apply as well, because I think that also definitely helps. But thank you all for joining, and thank you, Malvika, for helping with all of the questions, and Kelly for managing the back end for everything. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and good luck with your applications.
Thank you, everyone.